Good morning, everyone. Glad you're here at Friends Church. This will be a first this morning. We're talking about psychedelics and spirituality. In my wildest dreams, never thought we'd be talking about something like this in a church setting. You know, if I could just speak personally, I've always been a pretty straight-laced kid. To this day, I've never smoked a cigarette. Like, to this day. I only smoked a cigar a couple years ago for the first time. And not because growing up, yeah, it was one of those forbidden things, but for a long time now, it's not like something I go, oh no, it's some evil thing or whatever. It's not been like that. It's just been out of my peripheral, and I haven't really had a desire. But, so like the thought about psychedelics, I have to say, just personally, throughout the years, it was just one of those, it was forbidden. It was like, whoa, why would you even? And then I had an experience. And it wasn't mine personally. I'll just tell the story quick. My youngest son, Carter, was a snowboarder. He, from a very young age, excelled very quickly, got catapulted into the world of competitive snowboarding. And by the time he was 12, he was literally traveling all throughout North America, competing, filming, doing all kinds of stuff. As parents, we were white-knuckling every decision we were making because, man, this kid was just, 12-year-old. You know, he's traveling with a big team of national level snowboarders. And, we'd see him when you come back from these trips, and there was a point, maybe he was around 14, where he just seemed different, not himself. And Kathy discovered weed. He had a big sleepover, a bunch of buddies, and she brought that in. Well, I'd never smoked weed. I never grew up with, I was just removed. I was this church kid. I'm like, oh my God, what? And I remember looking at Carter going, what are you doing? And that started a season where we as parents were so worried about Carter. His grades were slipping. Obviously, his world was high pressure, intense competition. But the mood swings. He was becoming more reclusive when he was at home. I remember one morning pulling him out of bed going, Carter, you're going to school. And he's like, I'm not. I said, oh, you are. And we had it out. And for the first time, he looked at me and he threatened self-harm. And as a dad, I felt so powerless to help him. I'm just like, I don't know what's going on inside of you. And I don't understand this, all these things that you're experimenting with. And I'm just like, so we got into therapy with him. And man, as a parent, they say you're only as strong as your weakest kid. That season was just a nightmare for us. We're just like, oh my God, we gotta help this kid. I didn't know what to do, and it stretched on and on and on. And then, remember one morning, Carter came up from his room, and he said, Dad, I want to talk to you. Ice flew through my veins in those times when he said he wanted to talk, because I'm like, oh my God, what has gone on? I was just bracing for the worst all the time. And he says, I need to tell you about something that I did. And I said, okay. You all right? He's like, I'm okay. I said, okay. Okay. Should I be sitting down? He's like, you might want to sit down. He said, me, and he mentioned a couple of his buddies. He said, we went out and we took some magic mushrooms over the weekend. Well, at that time, I'm just like, what? Like, I was just instantly angry, going, what are you doing? Like, in my mind, I'm just like, it's drugs. But he was very calm, and he said, Dad, can you just let me finish? He said, we took magic mushrooms, and he said, I went on this trip, and he says, I can't even explain. But he says, it's like I began to see things that are going on in my world, in my life. And at that point, this 15-year-old kid began talking like he was 25. He said, I realize now why weed has had its hooks in me so bad. And he began to talk about depression that he's felt, some mental health challenges that he said, the pressure of competition. He began talking about all these different things, friend influences, the pressure of academics. And he says, I run to this thing thinking it's going to help. It was like a therapist was in his voice explaining what was going on in his life. And I'm sitting there, and I can't believe what I'm hearing. He's like, Dad, I see what's going on now. And he says, I'm gonna make some changes here. I know what I need to do. My jaw was on the floor the whole time, going, what the heck has happened? My kid took drugs. In my mind, I'm saying this. And it's like wisdom has pouring out of him now for his own life. That was the start of changes he began making in his life. That as a parent, there was no amount of control I could have, no amount of wise words, creative parenting I could have gotten him to see. And I remember just stepping back going, I don't know what's up with these magic mushrooms thing, but I can't deny that this trip that you had revealed some powerful insights to your life, and it's actually changing him. There were numerous times when I would start kind of talking about my hesitations and my reservations, speaking about drugs in general, psychedelics. And Carter would say, Dad, shh. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't pretend you know. Do your research before you come back and talk to me about this. So there were many times where I was like, okay, I'll wait and do a little more research. Well, it's been numerous years since that experience. And since that time, I've watched documentaries, I've read lots of articles. And Carter and we've had a lot of conversations. A little while back, Vince, we were talking about this series, The Spirituality of, and he says, I'm thinking about, what if we were to do a week on psychedelics? I went, yeah, that's a great idea. I would love to be a part of that. And so here we are this morning. I am not here as an expert. In fact, I still know so little in this world. But I have to say, my perspectives have shifted a lot since the early days. And I know that within this group of people here, there's likely some people that are going, are you crazy? You're not actually going to talk about this stuff like in a positive light, are you? I would challenge you this morning. You're in the spiritual gym. You're going to wrestle with some stuff that maybe might throw you for a loop. Be open-minded. And if anything, I'm just going to say this. Shh. I've spoken with a number of people within our community about psychedelics over time, and actually a good friend from our community here, he recommended our guest speaker this morning, someone I'm going to interview, and just had wonderful things to say about him. He's a psychedelic educator, he's an advocate, he's a guide for people who will go on psychedelic trips. He's an author, best-selling author. He's travels globally, he's a mastermind mentor, he's helped in the world of entrepreneurship. But over the last number of years, he and his wife, Corey, have been forging an amazing trail in the area of functional psychedelics, creating unique and powerful protocols for people to experience this stuff. And so I would like you to put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Jay Facette this morning as he joins me. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, thank you, brother.
Good to see you. Good to see you, pal. Thanks for being here.
This is an unusual circumstance, but I am honored to be here.
Jay, I'm not the only one that was resistant to the idea of psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
You too.
Yeah.
Were resistant to the notion.
Quite tremendously. So, I think even before I just sort of view my role here as, number one, to ask you to question some of the propaganda and some of the beliefs and some of the perspectives. You don't have to change anything, just question it. Number two, I hope to prepare people for what is coming and what is unfolding in our life and in our world, in mental health, in physical health, in spiritual evolution. And I hope to leave you with some questions and ponderings about what this might mean. But yeah, I was, and I should put it in perspective that I wasn't a church kid.
No, right.
I was. I sold weed in high school, just for
full disclosure.
Yeah, just I want, because it's important that people know. So I sold weed in high school, but I would never touch anything that was a chemical, because I just couldn't wrap my head around putting something in my body that, some
man-made.
Yeah, some dingbat in a bathtub is trying to make some money, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I wasn't really anti-drugs, but in the world of psychedelics, every time it got recommended to Corey and I, we'd have about a 30-second conversation and go, come on. Mm-hmm. There's just no way. Mm-hmm. But to put that in perspective, Corey and I are fundamentally high school sweethearts. We have been in relationship, although not always dating. We have been in relationship for 40 years. And as we were heading toward our 25th wedding anniversary, and we were having a tough time, like a really, really tough time. And I should articulate what I mean by a tough time, in that it wasn't like nobody's cheating on anyone, any of those sorts of things. What we were having a tough time was we were experiencing the drift that most couples experience when you're in the middle of raising 2 kids, burying 3 parents, of which we were primary caregivers towards the end for a couple of them, building a couple of businesses, and trying to navigate our life. And the truth of the matter is that we were doing a pretty damn good job at all of those things, except that distance between us was continuing to drift. Mm. And then we'd go and we'd do something, and we'd hire a coach, or we'd go somewhere, and it'd be better for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. Ring any bells to any of you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I've really come to recognize is that process is as natural and as normal as breathing. Like, it happens for all of us in terms of how our world has been designed and what we have been taught to value, at least in North America. So, as we're exploring, we for 5 years, people are like, try MDMA. You're still in love. You're still committed. You still got a chance. Try MDMA. And we're like, under no circumstances.
Now, for anyone out there that's going, MDMA, what are we talking about here?
MDMA is one of the current 4, 5, depending how you count, breakthrough drugs with the FDA that is creating miracles in mental health. So things like PTSD disappearing in 3 short sessions with people who've struggled for decades. Like it can be a miracle drug. It's in the empathogen entheogen category. It opens your heart.
We'll talk about we'll talk about some of that stuff in a second.
Yeah, but it was a chemical which meant that we would not have it, utterly and completely not have it. But I guess just for context, this is a little bit of fun. The end of February of 2020, I have my first MDMA experience. I do so without Corey, and kind of like a Hail Mary, like what's going to transpire here.
Level of desperation in the relationship.
Yeah,
and
like
so
I,
said,
at
okay,
that stage game, like I really thought we were done.
Okay.
And just in complete transparency, as did she, because she was spending time looking for condos.
Wow.
You know, like we were not in a good spot in any way,
Right.
shape, or form.
Right.
And again, not horrible, just unfulfilling, and we just couldn't connect. We just genuinely couldn't connect.
So that experience
Was one of the most meaningful of my entire life. I saw myself more clearly, more accurately, a little bit like your son. What my role was, how we built this brick wall between the two of us, how every single brick between us had a little justification and a story about why it's okay for us to have this distance, why, sex always diminishes after 20 years, why, like all of these stories about why it's supposed to be okay, when in my heart it's like, this is not okay, and something has to occur. In that moment, all of the blame of her about what she didn't do and should have done and all those sorts of things, and all the blame on me just evaporated, like utterly and completely evaporated. And I don't know how many of you carry some regret, some blame, some guilt, just in complete transparency. If there was a way for that to just evaporate, if but for a moment to see yourself more accurately, I would wish that for all humans. For all humans. And in that space, it was just so clear, like I must move on.
Wow.
So came home, had the talk with Corey of, I have this insight. I'm going to start taking care of myself. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to grow my hair. I'm going to fix my teeth. And I'm going to get on with my life. And I would love for you to come with me. And I assume that you can't, and that's okay for the first time. And that was the very first time we had this conversation. Instead of it's like, well, I'm going to change this, and then you change that, and then we'll change this, and then you'll change that, and I'll change this, and we'll change this. Like all this conditional if-then stuff disappeared. It was just, I'm going to do what I know needs to be done, and I love you, and I welcome you, and it's okay if you can't. It's 100% okay if you can't. Right. And that conversation happened March 3rd of 2020. I don't know how many of you remember, and just to be clear, yes. So by the way, when I say March 3rd, it went on for about 24 hours, so March 3rd and 4th. And then of course the world shut down March 13th of 2020. And then we had what we were pretty sure was gonna be 2 weeks to have meaningful conversations with one another.
Which stretched into a while.
If any of you had a hard time during COVID, I don't mean this to give you but we came out of COVID with a hashtag that we shared cautiously, which was hashtag best pandemic ever. And it was simply because we, quite frankly, spoke for thousands of hours with the support of psychedelics in many of those conversations, and not with the intention to save our marriage, but with the intention to answer the question, how is the two human beings who love each other find ourselves in this spot and so damn stuck?
And so it was revolutionary. Things
utterly and completely
changed. Crazy.
In manners that I would never have believed. And this is the part that I always try to remind myself. If you're skeptical, if you think this is wackadoodle, I understand, I get it, I spend most of my life there. And as your dear son said, you don't know until you know.
So here you are on the other side now. You've explored this world. And, now you're actually you're helping coach other people. I'm sure you get many people like us sitting here going, okay, that's fine, that worked for you, but I hear stories of how dangerous this stuff could be. Yep. Can we just, I can't deny what I've watched now I'm like, okay, what's the research on this stuff? Yeah. Like, what is science saying? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, I want to preface it by saying something I think is really important. The breadth and the reach of what is being called psychedelics is utterly spectacularly broad. The science is becoming unequivocally clearer and clearer and clearer, and the number of studies that are in the process of proving this, if you read from now until your last breath on planet Earth, you couldn't get through 5% of it, okay? So I, too, am a neophyte and learning, and I do not propose to be an expert in any way, shape, or form. The part I know I'm pretty clear about, and I'm very clear that there's a bunch I don't. But the science is fundamentally, unequivocally proving a handful of things. First and foremost, if we go back to the propaganda, psychedelics were misclassified as drugs way back when the war on drugs unfolded, and that misclassification
kind of the 60s, 70s?
60s, 70s, yeah. We can go into the 80s in terms of if we think of all of the I won't go down that road because that could take us a long time. But please explore the misclassification. And it is quite daunting, and it has caused harm. It has caused harm to people who could have been treated in meaningful ways that are in your family and your loved ones. It has caused harm in terms of burden on our legal system. It has caused harm. So the good news is politicians, the medical world, the legal system are beginning to discern and distinguish the difference between fentanyl and magic mushrooms. And not always in great ways, which, by the way, but it's beginning to get unfolded, and it is our job to educate ourselves and stay on top of it as best we can. That was a broad answer, but there's...
Sure. I think when I have began kind of diving into some of the research to understand, like, okay, so something happened magically with my kid that began illuminating a bunch of different stuff. What exactly was that? And, you know, I listened to some great podcasts. Andrew Huberman.
I love him.
Huberman Labs. He is turned into a wild advocate for psychedelics, but he begins talking about the neuroplasticity effects that psychedelics can have on our brain. Do you want to just talk to that a little bit?
And we're going to just make a couple of discernments in a moment or two in terms of different categories of psychedelics, but the fundamental idea here is that we have a default mode network, and most of us become very accustomed to how we think, what we think, and how we approach the world. Now, that fundamentally becomes invisible to us, and then we operate in our lives. Welcome to the human experience. The process of psychedelics, and particularly the classics, so what your son experienced, psilocybin, would be in the classics category. What occurs, and we've got a couple of slides here, is that your brain, the default mode network, which sort of manages thoughts of self and who I am, how I am, where I am, and does so whenever we're sort of thinking about ourselves, basically sort of shuts down or takes a little vacation, and the neural connections that occur in our brain expand and explode. And quite literally, sometimes by 100 times, sometimes by 150 times. Yes, this is a great one. So the left is simply the neural connections between different neural networks in our brain. And you can see there's actually more than you can see there just in terms of how the slideshow goes. But this is on psilocybin. That particular study, I believe, was 3 grams of psilocybin. So you can begin to see that the different neural networks in our brain and in our body and in our being are connected in a multitude of different ways. And what that allows us to do is to simply go, I see this differently. It provides a different lens, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. All of it, it provides a different lens. Now, that's all well and fine if we were to think about it, a 4.5 or a 6-hour mushroom trip or mushroom experience. But it's not the, I think, arguably most important part. The research is now saying that for 7 up to 21 days, depending upon what the psychedelic is that you're using, what the stacking mechanism is, that your brain has similar neuroplasticity as to when you were a child. And what that means, who's familiar with critical learning periods, where something happens and this occurs and it's like, boom, this is how it is, this is where we are, this is what's going to happen. And then we go about leaning into that and living that the rest of our lives. Quite literally, with the neuroplasticity that follows psychedelics, those critical learning periods get reopened. And we have 7 to 21 days. I get shivers talking about it. Like, ugh, it's like so exciting to me. Anyway, 7 to 21 days. Now, if we lean into what we want to create in our life, we have the most powerful opportunities for relearning, for becoming different, for shifting our views, for all the things that your son did in meaningful and powerful manners. And that neuroplasticity is really the core driver around the change that we are beginning to see in really powerful ways with great research and studies that prove it. It is no longer anecdotal. It is no longer anecdotal. It is proven scientifically over and over and over again. And there's a website called Psychedelic Alpha, by the way, which tracks every single study that's going on in every... Right now, as we're having this conversation, there's something in the neighborhood of 11,000 psychedelic studies happening all over the world. Like when we fast forward this, the truth is when your parents or grandparents go into a retirement home, they're not going to be on sedatives, they're going to be on some version of psychedelics microdosing. That's where we're headed to in the next 5 to 7 years. Well, I'm rushing that.
No.
But I wish it was 5 to 7 years. It's probably 10 to 12, but that's another conversation. So this process here, and again, this is not just artwork. This is actual mapping of people's brains on psilocybin. You can begin to see that we have the capacity to change things.
Yeah. I know that there's a guy named Michael Pollan.
Yes.
Who has been... he wrote a book, How to Change Your Mind. Maybe you've seen the documentary on Netflix.
And if you haven't, you must.
Yeah, I know when I started watching that, Carter told me, he says, Dad, you need to see this documentary. And as I started walking through that, I was blown away, just the sheer body of research. But just how much is changing the way people will see the world, in the world of antidepressants, SSRIs, what PTSD, former military people who have literally been paralyzed with PTSD, all of a sudden being introduced to psychedelics and like literally experiencing life-changing results.
Well, there's a part in here, and if you haven't watched that documentary, please do. But there's a spot in there where they're talking about the testing for MDMA specifically on PTSD, and the mean and the control and all of those pieces that they're comparing it against. MDMA quite literally broke the scale by which they measure. So there's all these pharmaceuticals that do X, and then there was MDMA that did Y. They had to change the measurement structure because it broke the scale. Now, just to be clear about this, that is one of the FDA deems it to be a breakthrough therapy drug, which means it's being fast-tracked in terms of approval. And it got to its stage 3, and the stage 3 trials, they were not happy with how that was done. It will be legalized, but we're not quite there yet.
I want to jump ahead here just because we start referring to some of the classics.
Yeah.
This was, part of the learning curve for me. When someone would say psychedelic, I'd think psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and maybe MDMA. I didn't realize that actually within the psychedelic world, there are a number of different categories. Can you maybe walk us through these things? Because you will hear these different names being used to describe, and they're used for different functions.
I wish I knew this when I started experimenting, because honest to goodness, over COVID, Corey and I made some mistakes. and just knowing what I'm about to share with you now would have solved at least a couple of them. Excuse me. So this is a bit of an oversimplification, but it really, really works because what you just said, most people see psychedelics through this singular lens. I'm going to ask you to consider psychedelics from 3 different lenses, the first of which are classics. So classics would be psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, peyote, ayahuasca. Most of the classics operate on the H2-1A serotonin receptor. Now, beautiful, amazing work. Your son had a great experience. But has anyone here ever either had or heard of a bit of a bumpy or bad trip?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So here's what you need to know. What I didn't know at the beginning of my exploration is that classics are non-specific amplifiers. Okay? So as a non-specific amplifier, if you take any of those particular medicines, it will amplify what's going on for you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, consciously and less than consciously. So if you've ever heard anyone say, it's like, oh, I can't do mushrooms, it makes me anxious, that's actually not true. you're an anxious human being, that when you take mushrooms, the volume of it gets turned up. So classics, while they can be beautiful and are incredibly powerful therapeutic tools, which, by the way, psilocybin is also on the list of breakthrough therapy drugs on the FDA. They're in the middle of fast-tracking that process. They can also be dangerous. They can also be scary. They can also lead to some bumpy experiences. So classics. And when I say bumpy experiences, that's why I wish I knew that before, but I found out the very hard way, which I wouldn't prefer that none of you find out the very hard way. And then the next category are what are called empathogens and entactogens. And those are all fundamentally chemicals. And there are things like MDMA, MDA, 2CB, 3-MMC, 4-MMC, sassafras. That entire family of psychedelics work on serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And they're heart-opening. The amygdala takes a little bit of a vacation. You love everybody. If you've never had the experience, think of it. Let's just imagine if you were naked in a tub full of puppies, and you were perhaps not the best metaphor at church, but it's just like that whole that's a little bit what that's like. So that category, the key piece from a therapeutic model is that the amygdala goes offline. And think of the amygdala as the fear processing center of the brain that keeps a gate on some of the things that have occurred, what you want to reveal, what you don't want to reveal, by the way, not just to the rest of the world, but also to yourself. So there can be memories, there can be surfacing of traumas, there can be all those sorts of things, which, as beautiful and marvelous as they can be, they can also open up doors that people aren't quite prepared for, which is why, again, guide training, support, all those pieces are important. Then the third category, which technically is not really so much on the psychedelic world, but it is still under the umbrella, are dissociatives. And think of dissociatives would be ketamine, salvia divinorum, nitrous oxide, depending on dose, 5-MeO DMT. So each one of these, this is like, classics are apples, empathogens and entactogens are pizzas, dissociatives are soft pillows. Like that's how different these three things are. But people have one experience in one category and make all sorts of assumptions and judgments about psychedelics that don't help us. Does that?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. When someone talks about the safety, worried, how do you speak to how safe these different categories are? Can you?
Well,
obviously, you're not going to the store and you're picking this stuff up, right? Like, can you speak to even that?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Can I actually put one in front of that?
Sure.
And the answer to that question is the safety of any of these are going to be determined primarily by you. What is your mental health? What is your physical health? What is your intention in the process? Why would you go down this route? What support do you have? Are you involved in a community? Do you have a safety net? Like those are the first questions. Like, why would I and where am I really at? Like, for example, if we're doing a personal journey, we don't do personal journeys without somebody doing an ACE score, which is the adverse childhood effects. Like that gives us a really good snapshot of what may or may not actually surface in one of those processes. And if you're going to work with a guide and they're not doing an intake process that includes something like that, you should probably go, not so sure. Does that make sense? So that's the first piece.
Okay, but even just talk about that for a second. What would be the adverse effects? Or the things that might, for you to look at them and go, no, you can't, you shouldn't?
Well, first and foremost, and again, it depends on the category. Each category is actually a little bit different. But if we use the ACE score, for example, so that's adverse childhood events. If somebody has an ACE score of 7 or 8, is not in therapy, does not have a decent support network, does not have, they may or may not be in medication. Sometimes they'll tell you all those sorts of things. We just say, you know what, that's not something that we're going to do. You need to get some primary psychological support. You need to make sure you build a network, all those sorts of things. And if and only then we could talk about maybe we could do something here. But that would be one of those examples.
Sure.
This is, and I want to just say this as clearly as I can. I'm starting to talk fast because I'm excited, which happens when I get excited about things. This is not for everyone. Like, I just want to be perfectly clear. I'm not here to try and convince you should. In fact, I would like to say to everyone is like, you should educate yourself about it, and then you should say, maybe. You know, like this is just not for everyone. So did that answer that question?
Yeah, medically even.
Oh yeah, like for example, in the empathogen and entactogen arena. So we do something called the connection experience, which is what, quite frankly, saved our marriage. We created this process for us to have these incredible connections. But there, SSRIs are fundamentally a no. High blood pressure, fundamentally a no. Heart disease, fundamentally a no. So there's a whole bunch of pieces just on the physical side where it's like, this is not ideal. It's not safe.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really key to be able to understand that long before you just step into this thing, understanding that, depending on a number of these characteristics, just could be you're lining up for a really bad experience.
Yes.
Let's talk. Actually, you mentioned a number of different things that can lead to good experiences.
Yes.
Set and setting.
Yeah.
Well, can you describe that? That's kind of a staging experience.
It truly is, and I'll go back just a little bit for. There was a time I remembered who actually created the set and setting conversation. It escapes my brain right now. But years ago, they were doing all sorts of studies, and this particularly with LSD. And of course, the military gets its hands on LSD and thinks that it's going to create super soldiers who are going to go and do incredible things. And of course, they give a bunch of the soldiers LSD, and guess what? The soldiers won't listen. They won't march. They're giggling in the corner. They're not really. And some of them had some adverse effects that weren't quite as much fun because it's a classic. But here's what became clear is that psychedelics, particularly the classics, which can open up these incredible doors, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the most important piece was set. Okay, so set is what am I bringing to this? What is my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual state of mind and intention when taking the medicine? So one of the pieces, and I want to just create a little discernment, the key distinction between medicine and drugs is intention. So if they're going to set an intention of what I'd really like to do is to explore my psyche and to understand how it is after 30 years when I'm in love with this woman, we can't maintain the depth of connection that we say we want. And that was the intention for some of my journeys. It's like, I want to figure that out. Like, how the hell? Why? What? Where? So that would be an intention. So what I'm bringing to it, if you're in a difficult state, if you're stressed out, if you're hanging by a thread, if you're in the middle of depression, that may not be the wisest time to take a classic. Does that make sense? Because that can magnify that process, which, by the way, I didn't say this earlier, and I just need to go back to it. The beauty of did anyone sort of get a little bit inspired by this idea of neuroplasticity? 7 to 21 days of the capacity to direct my energy and to create my beliefs in the same way as when I was a child? Like, raise your hand if that is someone. Okay,
yeah.
Beautiful, me too. But here's what most of the folks aren't talking about, is that if you have this incredible experience and if you create that opening in your brain and you go back to ruminating on the same pain, difficulty, grief, conundrum, issue, judgment, or pain, guess what happens? It magnifies and solidifies it even more powerfully, which is one of the reasons why I'm just really not a fan of most people just doing it on their own without some support and guidance afterwards, because that can happen. I lost my train of thought.
No, that's great. No, we're just talking about set and setting.
Yes,
You're talking about intention.
Yeah. So the set is what I'm bringing to it. And then the setting is the environment within which I'm taking it. Who am I with? Am I safe? Is this trustworthy? Is there a space for me if I get a little bit activated? Can I count on, no matter what, that I will be taken care of, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? And if you're in a space where that's not true, you shouldn't be doing it.
Can I ask you, like, the risk of, like, overdose, let's say? Is there a risk that could take too much? Like, in this world where it's so uncontrolled, for someone that says, hey, we're going to try this, whatever. Do you hear of many stories?
So it can happen, but again, this goes back to what are we talking about? So too much ketamine, for example, you will pass out and die. And if any of you watched Friends, who was the Chandler dude, he died in his hot tub on an overdose of ketamine and a cocktail of other things that transpired. So it wasn't just ketamine, let's be clear about this. So you could, that could occur.
Can happen.
But mushrooms, you would have to eat your body weight in mushrooms.
Yeah.
I think the actual number when they did the thing is they had 3 times your body weight. So, you know, if you can munch down on a couple hundred pounds of it, you might be in danger.
Yeah, I heard of something like over 1,000 times the average dose.
Yeah,
to actually,
it's not really going to happen.
Be fatal. Yeah, not.
So
likely.
again, this is why you need to know what the different lenses are, how all of those pieces work, and make intelligent choices. And this is again where you get a guide. So, could you do too much? Yes. And it's, again, one of the reasons why you want safe medicine, you want safe supply, you want it to be tested, you want somebody who you can count on, you want somebody who will be completely transparent about that. May I get on my soapbox for a brief moment?
Sure.
I spend a lot of my time at events in the US, and I've started just introducing myself as, listen, I'm an educator, advocate, and guide. If you've had an experience that you want to debrief or to talk about, or that you want to clarify, or you just want some support, I'm all ears, and there's nothing but listening. And I keep hearing folks is like, I went and I did a journey with X. I'm saying, great, what was the medicine? What was the dosing? All those sorts of things. I don't know because they don't tell you, and it's a special blend. So let me just be perfectly clear about this. You cannot have informed consent if you don't know what's in it. That's unsafe, inappropriate, illegal, run for the hills, maybe kick the person on the way out the door. Like, it's offside, inappropriate, and unsafe. So this idea of dosing, if you're working with someone, you know exactly what the medicine is, you know exactly what the dose is, you know exactly where it came from. They will share with you their testing process to make sure that you are safe. And if any of those things are missing, again, next. Does that make sense, gang? Like, it's this space has some wackadoodles. I don't know how.
Yeah. And I'm talking. It's funny, as we brought up psychedelics that we're going to be talking about. I was surprised how many different ones of you reached out to me saying, "Hey, look, I went on a trip, or I'm going to be going on one," and I'm leaning in, going, "Okay, who are you going to do this with?" Like, it is a wild frontier, a wild west, and so some of these precautions need to be thought through carefully. I don't dispute that the power these things have to be able to open up and illuminate stuff in our lives, change, create neuroplasticity, get us out of ruts. The talk right now, just in the area of SSRIs, my wife has been on antidepressants in the past. It hasn't been for a long time, but that whole world, they think the area of psychedelics could completely eliminate
Yes.
the whole world of antidepressants. And that is like a big pharma, like big money world. Like, this is and we're going to be hearing more and more of this. This is not going away. And so the more we can engage in these conversations, there's so much we could sit here and talk about. I put in the show notes today, both on YouTube and our podcast, a whole pile of different resources for you to go and just watch and read and learn. That'd be, if we could just agree that this morning, if nothing else, we could just say, go out and learn and educate yourselves on this. Maybe you're hearing saying, I'll never, great. You don't have to.
At all.
Just no, we're not here to try to encourage everyone to go out and do this. But this is coming. And now, as we've talked about this, you're going to notice it's everywhere. Every time you turn around, you're going to hear a podcast referencing some of the stuff that we're talking about here today. And we just want our community to be educated. I don't want someone to step out and do something that you regret later, just because you just didn't know. So we just, first of all, want to educate our community. We recognize that people are doing it. And I'm no longer on that side of the fence that's going, don't steer clear, whatever. I'm not there. But I just think that we need to be wise as we pursue it. Jay, thank you for opening up and sharing from some of your experience, your learning, your history. You've told me you would be available if people wanted to be able to consult with you. You do these connection weekends. You help people on a number of different fronts, and we can connect people to you if they would like that.
And I think the key piece to it is, in the same way as when I'm at other places, you can ask me anything, and I will share as honestly from my personal experience in terms of our training and all those sorts of things, and you decide. This is just, it's education, and it's the most important thing at this stage of the game. I would just love, if we're at the tail end of this, to just leave you with a couple of questions, which is, what or who in my life might benefit from me knowing more, not doing anything, from knowing more, to hold a larger container, to hold a range of different possibilities. So that would be like question one in terms of what do I need to learn? And then the next piece is, there are legal aspects to this. And we didn't talk about legal or illegal. Do we have a moment just to talk about that?
Yeah, we should.
Okay. So in Alberta specifically, there are special options cases, which, for example, if you're nearing the end of life, there is exemptions for you to be able to do psilocybin to help cope with end-of-life anxiety and depression and worry. So those things occur. Much like our Canadian government, though, and I'm teasing about this, but I'm not entirely wrong, is that they'd like you to be 2 weeks from death, and the paperwork takes about 6. Now, I'm being a bit of a jerk about that, but
not completely.
Not completely. And to be clear, by the way, my dear sister Lynn passed away almost exactly a year ago now, and we did some work together, but just with us, and it made a monumental difference, not just for her, but for my entire family, including my 82-year-old mother, who did MDMA with us the night before Lynn went to the hospice, which was utterly beautiful, one of the best things in my life. Wow. So there's that. There's also, if you've been struggling with depression, there is a special exemption that you can get MDMA-assisted therapy here in Alberta in that process. And the requirements are a little bit tough. It's like you have to have been treatment resistant for, I believe it's 7 years plus, and you had to have tried 5 specific types of medicine for longer than 6 months. So, again, I'm making fun of our government. So it's like you too can get that if you have a butter knife to your wrist. Right. So it's a little bit tough. And so there are legal, like if it has to be legal, you can go through that and you can get support. And there are lots of responsible, lots of big-hearted, and lots of safe guides if you know the right questions to ask, which are a bunch of those questions about how to talk to somebody are in the resources that are there. So please use those if you're going to explore that route. And then I think the last thing I just want to say is this space is spectacular. Like the conversations that I have most of the time is somebody pulling me into a corner and saying, I tried it. And I say, what's it? Can I say that out loud here? like that's normally sort of how it happens. It's very hush-hush. And here we are on a Sunday at a church, the eyes of God's Spirit, he, she, it, they, them, having a conversation that helps heal not just minds and bodies, but souls.
I'm grateful that you're willing to do this morning. And I just want to say how grateful we are to you to be so open-minded, to show up on a day like this as we're exploring this topic. Like I said, never in my wildest dreams. Someone says, you're just doing this because you're on your way out, and now you're dropping the bomb and saying goodbye. But I don't believe it. I think every year this topic is going to get revisited again and again. I think this is going to become a major part of our culture, and perhaps for many people, part of their healing journey and in the spiritual journey. So I hope that you'll be open to explore, to learn, to be educated, and to walk without judgment on this area. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
go research something called the Good Friday Psychedelic Experiment.
Yeah.
If you want curiosity, it's within the context of religion, and a bunch of religious folks did it, and the story's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, actually, that was a wild experiment. It's called the Good Friday.
Yeah.
Good Friday.
The Marsh something / Good Friday Experiment. If you look it up, you'll be well entertained.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you. We're all done.
Brother.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. We're talking about presence next week. I'm interviewing Jerry Smiley next week. If you know Jerry, we're in for a wild one next week. It's going to be impactful. You won't want to miss it. Have a great week. Maybe get out there and do some research. If you have your own stories, journey stories, talk to us. We would love to hear them and be a greater support to our community far and wide. Have a great week.